What would you do if a little girl at a muddy roadside market looked up at you with your ex-wife's exact birthmark shining on her forehead? Would you walk away or follow her into the unknown? That's exactly what happened to Matthew Cole, a powerful millionaire from San Francisco who thought he had buried the past under luxury cars, boardroom deals, and skyscrapers with his name in steel. But one rainy morning in a forgotten Oregon town, a single glance into the eyes of a girl selling vegetables shattered everything he believed about his choices, his success, and his heart. He didn't expect to find his ex-wife living in a rundown cabin. He didn't expect to question the paternity of a child who looked just like her. And he certainly didn't expect that what began with curiosity would turn into a storm of true sacrifice and a decision that could cost him everything. Stay with us as this story unfolds, because what Matthew finds in the misty shadows of Willow Creek may just change your definition of family forever. Matthew Cole should have been reviewing profit projections from the 42nd floor of Cole Holdings in Nob Hill. Instead, on a drizzly Tuesday morning, he pushed his black Range Rover north along US 101 windshield wipers, smearing city grime and self-doubt in equal measure. The memo on his phone, "Clients complain." Quality down flashed unanswered. A man worth $500 million was about to do something his board would call irrational, personally inspect vegetables. He told himself the drive was just quality control. The truth was harder to admit. Nob Hill's glass towers felt hollow. His penthouse echoed with silence, louder than any party he hosted there. He hadn't laughed, really laughed, since Alyssa Kane walked out 10 years ago. She'd left nothing behind except a small watercolor of a crescent moon and the faint memory of a matching mark on her forehead that glowed whenever she smiled. 200 miles later, the asphalt narrowed to gravel and the Range Rover fishtailed against Oregon mud. Locals called this last stretch Mill Road, though today it looked more like a river. Matthew spun tires, cursed softly, and finally surrendered. He kicked open the door leather loafers, sinking ankle deep. The air smelled of pine, rain, and wood smoke, a scent no luxury candle could imitate. The Willow Creek Farmers Market sprawled across a low meadow beside a swollen stream. Pop-up tents sagged under drizzle. Vendors called prices over portable radios that buzzed with gospel and classic rock. Matthew's arrival turned heads. Rain darkened the shoulders of his tailored coat, yet he felt strangely relieved each raindrop, another chip off the marble statue he'd built around himself. He tested peppers, sniffed basil, but nothing explained the rumors of best produce in the Northwest. Then he saw her, the girl at the far end, crouched beside wooden crates stacked 2 rows high. She was maybe 9, hair the color of wet wheat fingernails rimmed with soil. She pressed a tomato to her cheek, checking for softness. When she turned, a dark half-moon birthmark arced across her forehead. Matthew's pulse thudded. The birthmark was Alyssa's, an echo stamped onto smaller skin. He forced his voice steady. "How much for your radishes, miss?" The girl straightened a practiced merchant's smile, lifting her cheeks. $2 a bunch, sir. Grown without chemicals." Her words were firm, but the Oregon drawl thickened on "sir," a courtesy learned from someone who valued manners. Matthew stared, jolted into a memory. Alyssa, in a thrift store dress, rushing into his tiny apartment back when ambition was still a joke between them. "Your sky's the limit, Matt," she used to say, tracing that same crescent on her own forehead. He blinked hard. "I'll take 4, he said, handing her a crisp 20. "Keep the change." The girl's eyes widened. "That's too much." "Call it investment in good taste," he replied, hearing a quaver he hoped she missed. She tucked the bill into a tin box, lifted a wicker basket heavy with greens, and started down a path beyond the tents. Rain slicked the boards of an old footbridge leading into thick reeds. Matthew hesitated. Logic told him to leave. Whatever this was, coincidence, hallucination, could shatter with one wrong step. But his feet moved of their own accord. He drifted 50 yards behind her heart, hammering like he was 14 and cutting class. The path twisted through fir trees, then opened onto Willow Lake, a wide gray mirror broken only by raindrops. At the water's edge sat a weather-beaten cabin, tin roof, rusted windows patched with plastic smoke curling from a brick chimney. The girl pushed open the door. "Mom, I'm back." Matthew hid behind a cedar as a familiar voice floated out, older, huskier, but unmistakably Alyssa's. Tessa put the greens by the stove. Your brother's still napping. Tessa. He mouthed the name that was not his. He imagined a birth certificate filed somewhere Father Ben Crawford. The ache in his chest felt sharp enough to bleed. Boots scraped behind him. A fisherman in a raincoat limped along the shoreline, hauling a torn net. Beard salted, shoulders bowed. He looked every bit the working man Matthew had once sworn he'd never become. The stranger hung the net on a fence post and ducked into the cabin. Matthew stepped closer, water squelching in his shoes. The door opened again, and Alyssa Kane emerged, wiping her hands on a flannel apron. Her hair, once shimmering bronze, was pulled back in a loose braid, streaked with gray. Fatigue lined her eyes, but when she turned toward the trees, he saw the face he'd carried like a ghost for a decade. A basket slipped from her hands, carrots spilling onto the mud. Matthew, she breathed, voice trembling between shock and anger. He walked into the clearing, rain beating on his lashes. I didn't know, he whispered, throat raw. A smaller figure ducked under Alyssa's elbow. Tessa's cheeks flushed from the run. She stared at him with frank curiosity, crescent mark glistening under damp bangs. Mom, do you know this man? Alyssa didn't answer. The fisherman stepped onto the porch behind her. Ben Crawford. Matthew assumed, eyes narrowing. In his hand was an old hammer, casual but ready. Matthew lifted empty palms. I'm not here to cause trouble. His gaze locked on Alyssa. I saw the mark, her mark, and I needed to know. Thunder rolled across the lake like distant artillery. Tessa flinched. Ben laid a broad hand on her shoulder. Alyssa held Matthew's stare, rain streaking her cheeks like tears she refused to shed. You left that mark behind 10 years ago, she said, voice low. Why dig it up now? Matthew opened his mouth, but words drowned in guilt and rain. The silence felt electric, an invisible wire drawn tight between past and present. Inside the cabin, a toddler's cry rose, Lucas waking from a dream. Alyssa stepped back, shielding her family. Matthew felt the weight of years settle on his shoulders like sodden wool. He'd chased wealth across continents, yet one muddy path had reduced him to a trembling trespasser. Please, he said, barely audible. Let me explain. Another clap of thunder answered instead, louder, closer. Storm clouds darkened the sky to gunmetal, and wind whipped the lake into whitecaps. Ben ushered Tessa inside, then faced Matthew with quiet steel. Whatever story you've got, save it, he said. My house isn't a confession booth. He pushed the door shut. The bolt slid home with a finality that echoed in Matthew's bones. Matthew stood alone in the clearing, rainwater coursing down his collar. Somewhere behind that door, a girl with his eyes, perhaps, his blood, was asking questions he had no right to answer. He looked back toward the market path. The mud had already erased his footprints. To be continued. I'm truly sorry for interrupting the story at such a pivotal moment, but we'll pick up right here in the next episode. First, let me ask you, what would you have done if you spotted a child bearing an unmistakable sign from your past? And do you believe Matthew deserves a chance to explain himself after a decade of silence? While you think that over, tell us which country you're watching from, and if you're moved by this unfolding drama, please tap the heart and give the video a like. Your support helps us keep the story alive. Dawn broke in Willow Creek like a shiver. Gray mist drifted across the lake, muffling the hammer of Matthew Cole's heartbeat as he paced the sagging floorboards of his rented cabin. Sleep had mocked him all night, visions of Tessa's birthmark refusing to fade. At 5 a.m., he made a decision that felt equal parts desperate and inevitable. He slipped a monogrammed pocket knife into his coat and headed for Alyssa's cabin. The rain had paused, leaving the path slick and luminous under the first week light. Through a cracked window, he spotted Tessa perched at a crate table, tongue between her teeth, carving arithmetic into a homework sheet. A hairbrush lay beside her. Matthew's mouth went dry. He knocked gently. Alyssa answered, exhaustion shadowing her eyes. She opened the door just enough for civility. What do you want at this hour? I brought breakfast. He held up 2 paper sacks from the bakery in town. May I set them on the counter? Alyssa hesitated, then stepped aside. In the dim kitchen, Matthew arranged pastries by the stove, while Tessa eyed him with wary intrigue. Alyssa ducked into the back room to check on Lucas. The moment her footsteps faded, Matthew palmed the brush, slid the knife free, and snipped 3 golden strands. His hands shook so violently he almost sliced his thumb. He pocketed the evidence just as Alyssa re-entered. Thank you, she said stiffly, avoiding his gaze. We'll eat later. You should go." Outside, Matthew exhaled like he'd outrun a wolf. 10 minutes later, he pressed the hair into a FedEx envelope, scrawled a Portland Genetics Lab address, rush service, and flagged the only courier truck in town. As it rolled away, he realized how thin the threads of truth can be: 3 hairs, 1 signature, 10 years of regret. Meanwhile, 600 miles south in San Francisco, Victoria Langley sat at Matthew's mahogany conference table, fielding calls from panicked investors. The market sensed his absence. Coal holding stock was sliding. When an assistant mentioned a mysterious courier charge to rural Oregon, Victoria's pulse quickened. She reached for her trench coat, her resolve as sharp as the stilettos, clicking toward the elevator. Back in Willow Creek, storm clouds quilted the afternoon sky. Matthew approached Alyssa a second time this round without subterfuge. She was mending a torn sweater on the porch while Lucas stacked river rocks. "Let me help," Matthew said, offering a roll of cash. "I can pave the road to the school buy books." Alyssa pierced him with a look. "You think money fixes everything?" Some things were broken by money in the first place. Before he could reply, a dusty silver Audi fishtailed into the yard. Victoria emerged, trench coat whipping like a banner of war. "So it's true," she hissed, heels squelching in mud. "You love play farmer while your empire burns." Alyssa stiffened. Lucas hid behind her skirt. Matthew stepped forward. "Not now, Vic," he whispered, but she barreled past him toward the cabin door. "One word, please," from Alyssa stopped her. Something in the quiet dignity of that plea split Victoria's anger into shards of self-recognition. She turned back to Matthew. "Board meets tomorrow. Come home tonight or lose everything." Lightning scribbled across the sky. A single thunderclap rolled so hard the window panes rattled. From the lake rose the drone of an outboard motor whining, then a sudden, sickening silence. Tessa sprinted down the porch steps, finger pointing at the water. A small boat had capsized near the center of the lake, its hull bobbing like a turned-over coffin. "Dad," she screamed. Ben Crawford's name tore from all their throats at once. Matthew and several villagers leapt into a skiff. Victoria, stunned, grabbed life vests and followed. Rain slashed sideways as they rowed. The surface foamed around them. They reached Ben clinging to a shard of mast face blue. Matthew hauled him over the gunwale. Victoria pressed her ear to Ben's chest. "He's breathing barely." "Hospital's 40 miles," a villager shouted. "Ambulance can't reach us on that logging road." Victoria glanced at her Audi headlights faint behind the trees. "My car can." They loaded Ben into the back seat. Matthew climbed beside him, knees soaking blood-tinged water from Ben's jacket. Alyssa squeezed in with Tessa, while a neighbor held Lucas. Victoria floored the accelerator. Gravel spat like gunfire. Branches slapped the windshield. A landslide had gutted half the road, forcing her to swerve along the cliff edge. Twice the wheels lost traction, drawing gasps from Alyssa and cries from Tessa. Matthew gripped Ben's frigid hand, whispering, stay with us," as if sheer will could warm blood. When they reached St. Gabriel, regional orderlies wheeled Ben toward surgery. The surgeon hesitated. "Severe hypothermia, compound leg fracture, internal bleeding. We need to deposit $25,000 before we open an OR." Matthew pulled a money clip, but Victoria was already thrusting her Amex black card. "Run it," she barked. Only then did she look at Matthew, mascara pooling beneath her eyes. "I can't watch you lose another person you love," she said softly. The anger burned away, leaving something like ashes and tenderness. Ben disappeared behind double doors. Alyssa slid to the floor, back against the white tile, head in her hands. Tessa curled into Matthew's side, sobbing. For once, no one seemed to care that the billionaire's suit was stained with mud and lake water. Hours crawled. Rain hammered the roof like a million ticking clocks. At 8:17 p.m., a nurse finally emerged. Her face was unreadable. Matthew stood, heart in his throat. "We'll have to stop here. My deepest apologies for interrupting right at this crucial heartbeat. But before we continue, do you believe Matthew's sudden compassion can rebuild the trust he shattered years ago? Or is this rescue just another check he thinks he can write? And what do you think Victoria truly wants in the end? Revenge, closure, or something more human? While you ponder, tell us which country you're watching from, and if this storm-soaked saga has stirred your heart, please tap the heart button and give the video a like. Your support means the world to us. The nurse's silence stretched so thin it seemed the corridor itself might snap. Then she exhaled a single exhausted breath of relief. Mr. Crawford is stable. The surgery was successful. He'll need weeks of rehab, but he's alive. Alyssa crumpled forward, tears hitting the polished floor like summer rain. Tessa let out a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. Matthew felt his knees give as though some invisible rope had been sawing his legs for hours and finally cut clean through. Victoria's hand settled on his shoulder light, almost tentative. He turned. For the first time in years, she wasn't wearing armor. Her eyes were red but calm. "Go to them," she whispered. Inside the ICU, Ben lay pale, a forest of tubing, stitching him to beeping machines. Alyssa pressed her forehead to the back of his hand, whispering promises about gardens they'd plant in spring. Matthew hovered, unsure where a billionaire fit in a room humming with the currency of devotion. Ben's eyelids fluttered. When they opened, hazel irises focused on Matthew first. "Thank you," he rasped. Matthew swallowed against a lump of shame. "You saved my daughter every day for 9 years. I'm the one who owes." Ben's gaze flicked to Alyssa, then to Tessa, who was clutching a get-well card drawn in crayons. "Family isn't debt," he said, each word a gravel road. "It's choice." Matthew nodded, but the words tangled with guilt. That guilt deepened when the nurse tapped his elbow. "There's a courier envelope for you at reception." It was the DNA result rush processed lightning fast. He opened it in a supply alcove glimmering with fluorescent light. Probability of paternity 99.5%. Proof of what his heart already screamed. He could have hidden it, but storms only clear when clouds are split wide. He re-entered the room, letter trembling in his hand. Alyssa saw it first and her face went ashen. "I'm sorry," Matthew said, "but secrets rot faster than wounds. Tessa deserves the truth." Alyssa's lips parted, then closed. She reached for Ben's hand. "I tried to protect everyone," she murmured. "Maybe I failed." Ben's eyes never left Matthew. "Truth then," he said, voice firmer. "But on our terms." He motioned for everyone to lean closer. Alyssa, Tessa, Matthew, even Victoria lingering in the doorway. "Tessa," he began, "I'm your dad because I chose you the moment you took your first breath. But you have another man who gave you life, and he's here now." Tessa looked from Ben to Matthew to Alyssa. Tears welled, but her voice was steady. "Do I have to pick one?" "No," Alyssa answered, smoothing her daughter's hair. "You get two. If your heart's big enough, darling, keep us both." Tessa nodded as though such largeness was obvious. She reached across the hospital bed, took Ben's left hand and Matthew's right, and placed them together over her own. "Then start now," she said. "Please." Something uncoiled in Matthew's chest, a fear older than money, older than ambition. He let it slip away. 3 days later, Willow Creek woke to cloudless skies. Ben began therapy. Matthew settled his hospital bills with a single wire, but insisted on anonymity. Victoria handled billing details, each signature a quiet farewell. She had booked a flight back to San Francisco, yet lingered beside the rental car suitcase at her feet. Matthew approached her under the tall pines lining the lot. "The board needs you," she said before he spoke. "I signed the emergency credit line. If you take the red eye, you can stabilize the company by morning." "You saved everything," he said. She shrugged. "I saved what we built. Whether you still want it is up to you." He thought of shareholders of skyscrapers with his name on the lease, and no laughter in the halls. Then he pictured Tessa walking miles to school under winter sleet. "I'll come back," he said, "but only long enough to fix what's broken and transfer leadership. After that, Willow Creek is part of my life permanently." Victoria's smile was fragile yet proud. "Then give me proxy power until you return. Someone has to keep the wolves from the door." She extended her hand, the same hand that once signed their marriage license. He shook it, understanding it was both an ending and a pledge. As the plane thundered west that night, Matthew drafted a plan on a cocktail napkin: expand Cole Holdings' charitable arm, sell a controlling stake to employee trust funds, and redirect 10% of all profits to rural education initiatives, starting with Willow Creek. 2 months later, a groundbreaking ceremony drew every resident to the edge of town. A bright banner read Langley Cole Community School at Victoria's insistence. She stood beside Matthew Boots, muddied shovel in gloved hand. Alyssa, Ben now on crutches, Tessa and Lucas flanked them. Reporters snapped photos, but the only thing Matthew heard was Tessa giggling as she pressed her palm into fresh cement, a small crescent indentation at the heel of her hand flap. Construction boomed. Roads were paved, Wi-Fi towers installed, scholarships endowed for any Willow Creek kid accepted to college. At night, Matthew's cabin filled with new rituals, Alyssa reading seed catalogs aloud, Ben strumming an old guitar, Tessa teaching Lucas to spell photosynthesis. Matthew learned the smell of cedar smoke, the sound of quiet gratitude. Money, it turned out, was just a louder kind of silence, unless poured into something that sang. On Christmas Eve, Victoria sent a package, a silver compass engraved, "Find your true north." Inside was a note: stock price recovered. Investors happy. The world keeps spinning. Glad you found a reason to stand still. For the first time in years, Matthew toasted champagne without feeling hollow. One spring dawn, he and Ben met at the lakeshore. Two men who had nearly drowned in different waters. They said little, but when the sun cracked the horizon, Tessa burst from the trees with a little paper boat. She set it afloat, watching it catch light like a tiny lantern. "What did you wish?" Matthew asked. "That everyone has more than one kind of dad," she said. "Just in case they need extra." Ben squeezed her shoulder. Matthew felt something vast settle like roots finally touching earth. And if you ever visit Willow Creek today, locals will tell you about the tycoon who traded skyscraper shadows for pine-scented dawns, the family who needed two fathers to fill one child's sky, and the woman who loved fiercely enough to walk away yet still left bridges standing. Now, dear viewers, I have two questions for you. If you were Ben, would you have welcomed Matthew into your family after discovering the truth? And do you think Victoria's sacrifice was an act of love or simply responsibility? How did this story resonate with you? Comment number 3 if it touched your heart, number 1 if you felt unsatisfied, and number 2 if it was just average. Tell us which country you're watching from, and please tap the heart and share this video so more people can feel the warmth of Willow Creek.